Hey everybody, I'm Brian with Knox Company, and I'm going to show you how to install some windows yourself. And if you're already subscribed to the channel, thank you. I really appreciate it. If you're not yet, please consider subscribing. Hit the like button. It really helps me out. I appreciate it all. Let's jump into it. So first thing we're going to do is check the size of our opening. For example, if you have a 24-inch window, you usually want a 25 to 26-inch opening. With the windows that you're purchasing, they will also recommend a rough opening that's usually between 1 and 2 inches wider than the actual dimension of the listed window. Once we make sure that we have the proper height and width opening, we're going to make sure that that sill, the bottom of the window opening, is level. Check for level so we know ahead of time if we need to add any shims. Also, depending on what kind of opening you have, here I have OSB board all the way around. Sometimes the opening is cut very rough. So if you need to trim it flush, I use a router, like a flat router, and it will cut it flush, and I can just run it around the edges. Makes the opening easy so it doesn't push my window one way or the other. Now that we have all that handled, we can go ahead and do a test fit. We like to dry fit these windows first, again, to make sure we're not missing anything. We can move it side to side and push it up or down to see if we have a little bit of room to wiggle. We will be putting in some weather stripping. That will take up a small amount of space, but not too much. Just make sure that before we start putting the tape down and putting anything that's a little bit more permanent, that we have a good dry fit to make sure that everything fits in flush and sits flat against the opening. Another thing you want to check is to make sure that your walls are plumb or straight vertical. Just throw a level up on here, throw a level on the wall, make sure that we're not sitting in or out, because for whatever reason, your wall is leaning. That's something that you might want to correct for sure before, just structurally. But we want to make sure these windows are sitting flush against the wall. And if for whatever reason your wall is a little bit tilted, your window is going to be sitting at an angle too. So just make sure your walls are plumb. Now that we've dry fitted everything, make sure we have proper clearances, we can go ahead and get ready to start installing this. We are going to be using some weather stripping. This is commonly found at your hardware stores. You can order it online as well. But some of those things are used for windows, doors, roofing. They're usually a little bit like a tar or like a sticker type of material. They're thick like a PVC. Some of them, depending on where you're at and what they build with commonly, it might even be some type of material, a tarp type of material. It's just a membrane that we're going to be using that once we lay whatever type of material on the outside of the house, we have an underlayment to help shed that water away from the structure. In my case, I'm going to be using this VYCOR Plus. It's really good material. It's really sticky. And also, again, if we have OSB backing, sometimes it doesn't stick very well to it. They need to be pushed down with a little bit of poundage. It says like 30 or 40 pound roller. I can usually go around by hand and make sure it sticks. Sometimes they even tack them with nails on the outside or like small staples, because it's going to just help it adhere until we get the other layers of weathering for like stucco or whatever vinyl material you might be putting on the house. But we'll be using this here, found it at the local store, and it's not too expensive. And our first layer is going to go on the windowsill. We're going to wrap up the edges, both sides, about 4 to 6 inches, and we're going to go all the way across the sill and have some that exposes out. I like to use these 6 or 8 inch rolls because it allows me to get over the sill enough to cover into the structure and also get out far enough so that the nailing flange on the window has material underneath of it. Once you've weathered in the windowsill, we can go ahead and pop our window in. Again, this is where we're going to start checking for level. Throw a level against the bottom of the window, make sure it's not being pushed out by anything. Make sure that any of the welds around the window aren't keeping it off plumb. Find a level flat surface and put it up against there, make sure it's sitting. If you need to, go ahead on the inside, you can shim it. We can adjust the window as need be, and make sure that we have good material around all the edges so that we have something to screw or nail into. Making sure that we have an even spacing on both sides of the window in this opening is important, because we are eventually going to fill that with some type of insulation or window or door foam. That helps weatherproof the structure even further and also helps reduce on your heating and cooling bills, so we have less air moving in and out of the house around these windows or gaps. So make sure your window is sitting evenly on that sill with even spacing both sides. In my case, it's about 1/2 inch both sides, but you just don't need to have the window fully left or fully right. That could also create a problem that one side has a good area to nail into and the other side is missing it. Then once you have the window sitting plumb, we can go ahead and start putting in our screws or our nails. Sometimes they'll be using aluminum roofing nails. Again, they don't corrode, they're just made for weather resistance. I prefer these screws. These are a large flathead screw. They don't sit out very far, but they do have a wide head, like a washer head, mainly because we're usually screwing into some type of thin metal or PVC nailing flange, and anything small might actually push through that. So I try to find a screw that has a wide head that when it goes down on it, it applies a lot of even pressure. So this is just my preference. Another thing, I don't really like swinging a hammer around a window, so I prefer putting in the screws. I can kind of control how tight or how much I'm actually sucking the window in, and I don't distort or put in too much pressure and start twisting that nailing flange. But we're going to put our screws or our nails all the way around. For windows, it's common practice to do every other hole. If you feel overzealous or a little extra, you might want to do every single hole, but it's not necessary. Just make sure we have good coverage evenly around. Like I said, every other hole is usually just fine. Now that the window is all secured, all the screws and nails are in, check one more time on the side of the window and the base of the window to make sure we're sitting level. Shim as need be, or again with the screws. You can remove them and reapply the screws if you need to adjust anything. Another benefit using the screws versus the nails. But make sure everything's plumb. We got all of our secured nails and screws in, and we can start weathering it in, and we're almost done. And real quick, if you want to support me in the channel, I do make some clothing. I got hoodies, I got different sweatshirts that I print. I have different designs that I actually print myself. So if you want any of those kind of things, really good quality fitting shirts, I make them all myself, and I just kind of have it going out there. It's kind of fun to do, but another way that you guys can support. If you want to, shoot me an email, we'll work it out, but eventually I should have a Shopify or some type of account where we can sell some shirt or merchandise. But really cool designs. They all have some type of different logos or things. But if you want any of that gear, let me know, shoot me an email, or keep an eye out for my shop account. I'll have that up here soon. Our first layer of weathering is going to be over the bottom here. We're going to go across the bottom of the window again. This is going to create a layered system so that as water hits the structure, if it for whatever reason gets behind those barriers and hits the window, this is our last resort where it's going to shed that water away from our openings. So we're going to start with a layer across the bottom, go out both sides several inches. Then our next layer is going to go along these sides, both sides. Again, go all the way down to the bottom. You can cross all the way up to the top, go above the window several inches. We do want to make sure that it is getting tight up against the edges. It should stick really good to the nail flange, and depending on what your material is, you may need to make sure that we're putting enough pressure onto the material so that it sticks on this OSB. I haven't had any problems, and we've been getting some rain out here and it's been holding up. Our main thing is that it holds up long enough and stay in place so we can get our house wrapped and weathered in completely. And lastly, but not least, we're going to put our weather strip on top. We are going to run this a little bit further than both edges to create a large skirt across the top. You do want to have it slightly come on to the top of the window so this sheds the water off. We're going to go across the width of the window and across both layers, whatever that width is of the weather stripping going up the sides. Go about an inch or two over so we can create a little bit more water shedding ability. It's very similar to like how a roof is shingled. It's layer upon layer upon layer as we move down. And that's pretty much it. Pretty straightforward, making sure your opening is big enough, you got the right size windows, the right material, the right screws. Same thing goes for replacing windows. If you have to remove and put in a new window, this here is new construction, so it's a little bit easier if I need to make any adjustments, but it's definitely something you can handle yourself. It's not rocket science. Just take your time, practice on a couple small windows, then you can move over to some bigger windows, and next thing you know, you'll have it all done, save yourself some money, and you can be proud of the work that you did. And once again, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I do have links for everything in the description for any type of special materials, screws, or things you might need. And if you haven't already, hit the like button, hit subscribe. I got a lot of videos showing you how to do things around the house, everything from new construction to renovation. So if you're into that kind of stuff, please consider subscribing. I appreciate it all, and thank you guys for watching. I'll see you on the next one.